What's going on, Drop Team? This is LR Knight. I'm back with part 2 of my making easy to make, cheap to manufacture, table filling, modular sci-fi city ruins. So last time we went through the 3 main parts, through the cuts for the whole sheet, then we looked at cutting them down to size, and we looked at the 2 different main types of components, which are the flat centerpiece, it's a standard size, and then these corner joists that help your entire table look kind of contiguous, as if it was made by one civilization rather than scattered together. So it's definitely got kind of a brutalist look to it. Everything is very mass manufactured, as if it was built really quickly in order to serve the needs of a rapidly growing sci-fi settlement. And what I'm going to do today in this video, which is going to be a lot shorter than the last one, I learned my lesson, is we're going to go over battle damaging. We're going to go over Mod Podging to seal these things in. You can see the effects of that down here. Base coating, dry brushing, and then detailing. So in order to show you what we're going to need, you're going to need your pieces, right? They should have windows by now. They should have texturing and some battle damage and maybe some bullet holes and any other features that you want attached to them. I'm going to recommend that you get some toothpicks. You don't need a lot. This case has lasted me for years at this point, but we're going to use some toothpicks for rebar. You're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers or pliers that can cut through this wood efficiently so we can get a nice clean cut for some of those rebar finishing. You're going to need a hot glue gun, and either Mod Podge or good old-fashioned Elmer's glue can also do the trick here, although it is a little bit more difficult to work with. So I've done it both ways. I don't think it makes a tremendous difference. Mod Podge is certainly a couple bucks more expensive than this tub of Elmer's glue, but depending on what you've got, depending on your budget, you know, either one will do. I would just recommend that you buy the big tub of either one. So, you'll need a couple paint brushes too, and some cheap acrylic paints, which are not in hand, and I'm just going to keep the video rolling. So this time for this video, I'm going to cut much more aggressively in order to get through it, show you each of the steps. So our very first step is to look at battle damage. So we've already textured by beating it up with rocks in a roller or just smashing it with rocks. We've already added some bullet holes. And what we want to do is we want to make it look like these have been hit by maybe some artillery or smashed together somehow, right? And that really will bring out texture and volume that looks very good from 3 feet away. What did I land on though? So it might not look great up close, but when you're standing up, you're 3 to 4 feet away on the table, your eye is not going to resolve those details. But when we battle damage, it picks up the highlighting dry brush, the final stage, quite nicely. So I will show you how we do that. I'm going to go get my X-Acto knife. Remember, if you're a kid or inexperienced with a knife, I would strongly recommend wearing a safety glove, which I will do to be a good example. Okay, I just realized there might be a little bit of whirring and humming in the background. If you hear that, that's coming from my 3D printer. So with battle damage, we want to think kind of logically about where we're going to be cutting and what sorts of cuts we're going to make. And I'm just going to come in here with my knife, and I'm going to cut a slit and reverse it and just pop that sucker out there. It doesn't have to look nice because it's battle damage, right? This is a little bit easier when I've got my 2 hands free, but whatever. So I'm gonna get in there. I'm just gonna twist that sucker out. I'm gonna let it be ugly. I'm gonna give myself permission to make some ugly stuff, because battle damage always looks awful, right? So I'm thinking logically about what will this look like when it's done, but not worrying too much about the final detail, because in the final analysis, it's gonna look fine from 3 feet away. Just gonna pop that sucker out, right? Glove protects your thumb. If you're a kid, make sure you're using gloves. I would not recommend going at this too hard, and I would not recommend using a rasp. I've seen some videos where people use rasps, but the EVA foam, you do not want it to get into your lungs, which is why I recommended when cutting, we're using a ventilator or a mask, preferably both. You know, cut in an area where you've got lots of airflow, and you will be a happier camper with healthier lungs. So, okay, so that's how I would texture one panel. I'm gonna cut the video, I'm gonna come back, and I'll have a couple more done here in a second, and then we'll look at what those look like. And then we'll begin to texture the edges. just as a quick extra aside here before I show you the final pile, you can do panels that have holes in them. There's nothing wrong with that. If you've got like big mechs or big guns or something like that, it might even make sense to have panels that have holes in them. One thing I'll say though is don't get overly hung up on the details. Just keep moving, just like we were when we were texturing them. Just keep moving. Maybe there's a story there that you can pause on a panel and spend a little more time on, but ultimately we want to make this quickly, efficiently, in order to have a board ready to play, okay? And as I've been going, I've been breaking bits and pieces off of them occasionally just to break that silhouette up a little bit. You know, I want to have some square panels because these work as connectors for walls, just like I want to have some doors. But I also want to avoid having too many samey shapes. So just something to keep in mind. All right, with that, flipping back, and here I will reveal the final spread of all these pieces with the battle damage. Okay, so now I have my full set of tiles, more or less. I think I might have miscounted on my pillars, but I have a whole box of them next to me, so let's just grab 3 or 4 more of these bad boys, or 5, and we're gonna put those right there. Okay, so here's what I've got. I tried to keep in mind, as I was going, what it might look like to have a battle-damaged city, right? And I tried to keep in mind that I want different silhouettes on the board, because it's gonna make it more interesting, but also it provides different tactical opportunities. Here you could go right to the door, you could take cover at this windowsill, right? This might be a shop or something like that, right? This might be the front of a factory or a movie theater, who knows, right? And I tried to provide different looking lines of battle damage. So here it's on the ground rather than up on the top, so maybe a grenade went off. This door on this face is really damaged, suggesting a blast, but then on this face, nothing. Right, and I still have a little bit of cleanup work to do, but not much, because honestly, it just becomes texturing. So I left some holes in the walls, I gouged it out in a couple places, right? I don't need to be super creative, I just need to use that knife and let the knife guide the direction that we're heading. So these are all the long walls, and then we've got some window silhouettes. You know, here's another like diner style window. Here's just a single window. So those are my long pieces. And then I've got my short pieces, and I'm not going to show them all off. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what these silhouettes might look like. You know, and I've kept all the pieces of the buffalo so that I can make some scattered terrain later. Here's one where I put 2 holes in the wall, just, you know, as a curiosity. Okay, and then with the pillars, I didn't do a lot with the pillars because I want them to not dominate visually. I just etched out, you know, some general ricochet style damage. Most of my troops are smaller than these, so the shots that I chose to fire into them were going up at an angle as if a bullet stray took a chunk out. You know, the other thing you can do is you can just use your thumbnail and just pick out. That really makes it look like a bullet impacted that area. And it looks ugly, especially on the raw foam, but when it comes to the battlefield and the highlighting, it looks really good. So with the pillars, by the way, I left at least one face completely alone, knowing that I'm going to glue that probably, or it's going to be flush to one of these walls. So I didn't worry too much about this inside face. It's up to you if you want to. Personally, I mean, there's only so many hours in the day. Do I really want to spend a texturing a face that nobody can see anyway? Not really. So there's my pillars. Here's my slats. What I'm going to do with these slats is I'm going to pick a couple of these, like maybe this guy, and I'm going to put it like over here. And I can see here I might have to trim this down to size a little bit, but it just provides slightly different silhouette. You know, somebody can be right in here for cover, or it might provide, you know, if you're diving in feet first into hell, which is one of the reactions, it might give you a chance to get into total cover, where otherwise here you'd be in partial cover. So it's just something to keep in mind. I didn't cut very many of these because they were from scraps, and I don't want it to dominate, you know, so it does, however, as you just saw, it can help some of these be single piece standalones, especially when they're glued together. There's very little wobble there. So, okay, the next step that we are going to do is we are going to edge along all of the top edges that are not likely to be connected to a pillar. And the reason we're going to do that is because we want it to look like this is a bombed out ruin, right? This is very easy. I'm not putting that glove on, sorry. I've been using a knife for like 30 years. I'm just going to nick off the edges and soften them a little bit. Knife tip, never cut towards yourself if you can avoid it. If you can't avoid it, you need to reconsider your hand placement. Just be safe. There's no reason to hurt yourself doing hobby stuff, right? And again, just like with everything else, you can flick the knife in order to like pop it out. You know, this is kind of an ugly windowsill because I didn't bother to use a guide, so we're gonna make it even uglier. And now it looks like maybe it was blown away. Took a rocket or something. You know, try not to think about the fact that we don't have a lot of ceilings here. That always throws me off because I'm very visually inclined and I want my battlefield to look good. But ceilings do present some problems. And I think I may do a future video on how to include stairways and bridges into this set. I just haven't made any of the Pathfinder models myself, but I can see visually how I would do that. So it should be fairly easy. So I'm gonna cut the video here. I'm gonna come back and I'll have all of my battle edge pieces, and then we are ready for the next step, and one of the most important, which is the sealing with Mod Podge or glue. Okay, so now I have all of my pieces fully textured and they are ready to be Mod Podged. There are a couple things that I did, like I know that some of these pillars are gonna be a little long, so I broke off the top just by taking my thumbnail and just crinkling it in and pulling it out. Again, it looks awful now, but it will look good once it's got the highlighting on it. And, you know, on every piece where it seemed logical, I blunted the edges. The other thing that you can do too is take your knife and drag it backwards, and it'll help soften up some of those edges. You know, if you're seeing an edge that you don't like just quite how sharp it is, it seems unnatural, you can just drag your knife gently backwards, you know, and really soften up an edge. So I did that on most of the pillars too. I just went just like that to dull the edges, you know, and it helps soften it up, makes it look a little bit more careworn. The last thing that I just wanted to point out is I did not do a lot of the edging on some of these pieces because these can serve as the foundation for a second floor piece. Now it's okay because, you know, we're thinking these are concrete blocks that were laid down together, so there may be some differences between them. But you might want to consider leaving a couple, especially the long pieces, with a flat top so that you can stack a couple of the pillars and build a second floor. So just an additional modification. All right, we're going to cut to the Mod Podge. So Mod Podge is our next step, or sealing anyway, whether you're using Elmer's glue or whether you're using actual Mod Podge. I've done this enough that I just prefer the outcome of Mod Podge. One thing I will note is that it sticks to everything, so you need to have a clean, open workspace that you can work on, and you can't rush Mod Podge. So let's cut right to that. I'll show you what that looks like. I'm basically going to take a piece and I'm going to paint it, but you'll see that in a second.